fallen leaves tell a story of how a tarnished became Elden Lord in our home across the fog, the lands between.
We all have those experiences that change our lives in some way, shape, or form, and it's no different within the gaming sphere. Like those small moments where you tell yourself, man, I wish I could wipe my memory of it and replay it all over again. Whether it's classic Call of Duty brain rot, or spending several years into a mobile game that you've made several bad life choices with that you wish you could take back the more you think about it, but you can't, we all have those experiences that leave a profound memory in our lives. And no other game accomplishes that more than Elden Ring. I've been contemplating exactly how I wanted to do this video with it being out for almost a year. With this game and its several updates, both very bad and very good, the controversies surrounding and or mentioning it, and with it now have taken home Game of the Year.
Viewers, we may need to turn the channel to something else. Better.
I figured I'd finally get my ass into gear and talk about the fact that not only is Elden Ring deserving of Game of the Year, but has also crowned my newest favorite game of all time. No other game has struck a chord with me than this one, and I finally am able to boil it down to 4 specific aspects that make it special. I have put in at least over 160 plus hours into the game, and have beaten it about 2 to 3 times to get my full thoughts together, and the majority of this will be based on my experiences with it. So come with me on a journey as we look back into the world and magnificence that is this game. One of the first of many to come, this is my love letter to Elden Ring. Honestly, if you told me that I would come across a game in which every single time I enter a new playthrough, and every time I open the door to the beginning of the game, that I'd instantly be reminded of how gorgeous and beautiful the game's world is by default, I'd call you crazy. Because in this new era of modern gaming, games like that are almost impossible to find. The world of the lands between is not one to tread lightly at first glance. One could say that it doesn't look that massive at a distance either. However, appearances can be deceiving. At one point, I once thought that after Liurnia that it couldn't possibly get any bigger. But then it got bigger. And bigger. And the map just kept expanding over and over. Elden Ring's world is absolutely massive. There's no doubt about that. However, it never feels as though that it was too bloated, nor did it feel too overwhelming either. Everything that comes with each new aspect of the world just felt so purposeful, and really allowed you to get invested in exploring more. Not only does it service the immersion, but they also service the lore aspect, which we'll go on later. Each new environment that has that semblance of spectacle and storytelling just stands outmatched. There's really nothing else like it. Graphically, it's nothing special, but the art direction and visual storytelling makes up for it, and even above that, to the point whether or not if the graphics are insanely good, the art direction is what carries a game more than most. especially when you take the time to just relax and take the scenery all in. It gives me what I like to call the Ghost of Tsushima effect, where the large majority of the time I'm just having too much fun riding my horse and just exploring. Transitioning from the linear style to open world is what I believe to be Elden Ring's greatest strength, as it allowed From Software's level design philosophy to be taken to new heights in which it succeeds in spades. The transition from open world environments to the classic From Software level design with its castles, dungeons, and even catacombs are absolutely immaculate. Not once does it feel like it's out of place or that it doesn't work. Its ability to integrate side content that not only adds more but also changes in style and level design with each new location you explore is nothing short of brilliant. You get your standard encounters, of course, around the overworld, whether it's a bunch of soldiers and trolls carrying a giant carriage, a group of underlings on occasion that will pray to an altar, or something else entirely, like at the beginning where you see people praying to the Dragon of Gil. Multiple landscapes can actually be destroyed throughout multiple boss fights or normal encounters. Everything about Elden Ring's world is what makes it the best in the industry in design, hence why other devs are now starting to feel influenced by it. One of my favorite areas in the game is when you find this windmill village, where all the villagers just do nothing but dance and don't attack, unless if you attack first. It's just absolutely breathtaking how From is always capable of creating a living, breathing world. Another thing that it encourages is lack of hand-holding to the player, and no other indication of this method is at the beginning of Limgrave. You have a massive fork in the road after you get talked down to by
You are maidenless.
in which you have two locations on your left and right, as well as a tree sentinel in front of you. Now, hardcore veterans like me thought it was smart to go after the tree sentinel first. Now, unlike other people where they feel encouraged to go out and explore other locations and then come back with a better chance, my brain decided to go after the sentinel until I killed him. So after several attempts, I finally got him and continued on my merry way. Elden Ring's open world is filled with encounters like this, all throughout its various gorgeous vistas and levels, and it also accommodates with the gameplay and the ability to pick and choose your battles and encounters, which then leads to this game's second greatest strength: choice. Elden Ring's second greatest strength is the ability to choose how you approach your game and how you approach your playstyle. Now, From Software's games are no stranger to this gameplay loop, but Elden Ring decides to take that concept and adds everything in the kitchen sink. Elden Ring's gameplay variety is absolutely monstrous in how much there is to use and ways of approaching difficulty and enemy encounters. There's jump attacks, which allow for posture breaking for more damage, guard counters, which allow for fun close quarters combat situations. Summoning AI is handled with a new approach with spirits, some clearly better than others. And all of this isn't even talking about the build variety. Horseback combat is pretty fun too, especially when you're around slaying dragons, but more on that later. There is also a crafting system, though I never felt the need to use it, but it's still really cool to have. The many different ways to approach your build leads to an abundance of creativity and ways of approaching gameplay. And it fixed one of the very few things with Souls games that I really didn't care much for. Magic is actually super fun. In previous Souls games, I never had the reason to want to try anything outside of melee, as it never looked all that fascinating and never encouraged me to stray away from my playstyle, which I can only describe as
Unga Bunga!
But with Elden Ring, there's so much weapon variety and build variety that with the new ability to respec your builds as often as you want, thanks to Larval Tears, that you have all the room to constantly change your playstyle, no matter the playthrough. Which also adds to what I think is one of the many things that other Souls games seem to struggle with: genuine replayability. A perfect example of this is with Ashes of War, a mechanic that I believe should be present in every other Souls game going forward. These items can be found all across the map, and basically allow your weapons to have special unique abilities that make your weapon all the more unique, and allows for even more diverse movesets on top of everything else that I just mentioned.
Well, you done fucked it up again.
Think of it as similar to the elemental weapon system in Outriders, easily that game's best feature. Progression in this game feels more rewarding this way, and it always makes you feel that everywhere you go in this vast open world, that you're always finding new ways to be creative. get stronger, and finding different ways to deal with a vast enemy variety, and the difficulty that comes with each new locale. This allows for not only experienced players, but also brand new players who have never played a Souls game in their lives to dip their toe, and experience what makes the game so special. Despite the idea that you could argue that this is From Software's easiest game, the difficulty now feels as more that it's the gameplay itself that is the challenge, more so than it is punishment for failure, even if some of the enemies are still quite bullshit. Now, with all these newfound tools at your fingertips, there's no true test of strength without easily the most widely known and the selling point of Souls games and Souls-likes, it's the challenging yet fun boss fights. And boy is there a lot of them in Elden Ring. Boss design in Elden Ring has been a constant talk within the community and ultimately boils down to either some of the best bosses or worst bosses in comparison to games like Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne. I'm more leaning to the former rather than the latter. The bosses in Elden Ring are some of the best, most energizing, and breathtaking bosses From has ever put together, even if certain ones have been reused a handful of times. From a design perspective, the difficulty, lore, more on that later, and overall enjoyment, these bosses on multiple playthroughs are the ones I'm always looking forward to. Ranging from your standard Wolf of Radagon to the most powerful of demigods in the lands between, the level of quality of these bosses are able to rival some of From Software's best. Morgott, Mohg, Radahn, Godfrey, Godric, Astel, Malekith, Renala, the Fire Giant. All these, and even the overworld bosses, are some of the most fun I've ever encountered, and I'd go back to again and again. Each of the main bosses capture the feeling of it being a duel between a god and a single man, both visually and gameplay-wise. Let's not kid ourselves here. While it is the easiest of the other games, Elden Ring's bosses will still kick your ass and then some. But as mentioned previously, the approach to the difficulty of these bosses is entirely dependent on your choices, which makes the engagement against these foes all the more fun. You can either choose to make it harder on yourself, or you can completely trivialize the fight. Some say this messes up balance, but it still ultimately is dependent on the player's choice on ways they want to approach the upcoming battle. They give you the tools for that exact reason. No RPG is truly balanced, but it's always important to change up the way the boss approaches to accommodate your attacks, which is something I think Elden Ring accomplishes to some degree. The perfect example of this is what many regard as the hardest boss in any Souls game to date.
Hey, hello. I hope you're enjoying the content that you're watching. I don't want to turn around. It's a bit nosy of me. I bet you're watching something really good, aren't you? Bet it's really awesome. You want me to turn around? You want me to... I've been duped.
Malenia, Goddess of Rot. Many people had troubles with this boss, including myself, but on consecutive playthroughs afterwards, I started to notice something about every time I encountered her. For every time I changed up my moveset and my build, every time I was fighting her, outside of her easily predictable patterns, she continuously changed and mixed up her moveset as well. Some attacks she will do earlier than normal, and some attacks she'll have longer windups. This, in turn, makes each encounter with her all that more energizing, as it inherently teaches me something new about this boss every time. I absolutely love this approach to boss fights because it breaks the standard boss formula where over time, the boss becomes more predictable and it makes these encounters on later playthroughs rather boring. Elden Ring continues to elevate this formula to which the game is always keeping you on your toes, something that is further influenced by the player choice within the gameplay. Some bosses even have specific weaknesses where the Omen twins can be stopped by a shackle that holds them in place. Mohg's Nihil can be negated by a crystal tear that you can find before fighting him. Scarlet Rot absolutely cripples Radahn, obviously, and even the Erd Tree avatars are weak to fire. All this and more that I'm sure that I'm forgetting further illustrates why this approach to boss design further enhances their quality and gets me excited for each time I fight them over and over again. While there are some stinkers, like the Falling Star Beast, and some of the bosses repeat and are reused more often than I'd like, the bosses of Elden Ring gave me some of the best experiences I could have ever hoped for. Speaking of lore, it's finally time I talk about what's ultimately disregarded by mainstream media. In my opinion, From Software's environmental storytelling is absolutely second to none in the industry. Their ability to tell a story throughout the little use of cutscenes and dialogue, but have the details within the world itself, is nothing short of incredible. Yet, sadly, there are more people who overlook this aspect of their games than there are good journalism arguments for an easy mode. With all this in mind, I will say that the way some of their stories can be told is a little bit too obscure for the normal audience to consume, which leads to the resentment that the genre gets. Elden Ring answers that with having the opening cutscene being pretty much self-explanatory. The Elden Ring has shattered, which led to a war with no true victor. You, being a Tarnished, are now tasked to return to the Lands Between and restore order to it, and claim your rightful place as Elden Lord. With that foundation put into mind, you now have the ability to put the pieces together, both literally and figuratively, and discover what happened here. I love this type of storytelling because it truly emphasizes that you are the main character in the story, that your presence in the story is significant, and it feels good. This also perfectly ties in with the open world of Elden Ring, with each environment all telling a story, and digging in deeper to find the juicier details is that much more rewarding. Souls games are the perfecters of this type of storytelling. I mean, when you have hundreds upon hundreds of channels dedicated to talking about the lore significance of this one particular flower that you've probably seen once or twice, and make an hour-long video summarizing it, yeah, it's safe to say you have something truly captivating here. The lore of Elden Ring also has significance in the gameplay with the different tools that you can use and the items that you can collect having established lore, especially with the magic spells that you can find. Holy magic comes from Marika and the Golden Order. The blood magic comes from Mohg and his Grand Dynasty. Red lightning attacks come from the ancient dragons, along with beast incantations coming from the beastmen. Scarlet rot comes from Caelid and Melania, and so on. It's always fascinating to just discover how much great intrigue Elden Ring has to offer, especially with having George R.R. Martin writing your universe. Characters are great too. The side quests involving them are some of the most fun. Gideon Ofnir, Nefeli Lu, Fia,
The loathsome dung eater.
Ronnie, Blade, Alexander, all great, really great characters that feel great every time you get to see them again, and give the story and lore that much more gravitas and impact among your main quests. Hell, even depending on which main quest you choose, they have ways of influencing of how much you choose the Lands Between's fate, and adds on to the replay value of the game that I mentioned earlier in the video. However, in the grand scheme of things, only 2 of the endings have any real huge significance and differentiate from the other endings that are available: the Age of Stars ending and the Frenzied Flame ending. The majority of their endings are essentially palette swaps with different names. They still hold significance nonetheless, but those 2 main endings are the only ones with true difference from each other. One thing I will give criticism to is that I hope that if there ever is DLC, that they give us new branching endings that feel on par with the Age of Stars and the Frenzy Flames quality. Aside from that, the addition of more than 2 separate endings was a fantastic one, because it adds so much weight to the quest lines you do and the characters you meet that it makes it oh so satisfying. Which honestly I believe is the greatest aspect of the story. You. The way you feel that you learned more about the characters and the aspect of this world that is left in the air, and that your choices matter. You are the main character in your own story, and your choices matter with the fate of this world in some way, shape, or form. Do you want to remain stagnant and continue the cycle? Do you want to break the cycle and fight for a better future with your multiple armed waifu? Do you wish to perfect the old order and fix what was broken before? Or do you say, to hell with it, and watch the whole world burn to the ground, because there's no saving it? It's all in your hands, and that's what's so amazing about it. The emphasis of the importance of the main character in your plot, and being able to learn more as you continue through the path and harsh trials of the Lands Between, and change it for better or worse. I'll be honest, the more I continue to write the script of this video, the moment that I realize that every point I make always seems to intertwine with each other. That each of the main 4 points that I have made benefits from one another. And that's honestly the beauty of Elden Ring, ultimately. From its magnificent open world and level design comes with its satisfying gameplay. From its satisfying gameplay come its fun and challenging bosses and boss design. And the fun and challenging bosses have such great lore and impact on the story, which then rotates all the way back to the game's world, and becomes an endless cycle that continues to benefit one another. Elden Ring is that cycle. The idea that a game like this came out in the current state of gaming where it feels just so empty and lifeless, aside from some outliers, shows that there is a glimmer of hope for the industry as a whole. The impact this game brought to the Soulsborne genre when it was released, all the way up to now, coupled with the insane popularity, is something I'll never forget. It is that game where I wish I could wipe my memory and play it from the beginning all over again. And with DLC potentially coming soon, that most likely will never change. And quite honestly, I'm happy about that. That I got to experience this massive accomplishment for myself, and got not only my best friend to play it, but my dad to play it. And it is why it's the best game of 2022, and my new favorite game of all time. And that is my love letter to Elden Ring.
Well then, shall we? My fair consort eternal.
Be sure to click like and subscribe. I was not held at gunpoint.